were talking about. I've been dabbling with low dose nicotine, and I find it to be really effective, like as a nootropic, as a cognitive enhancer.
Yeah, I started to consider it when Dave Asprey wrote about it with his first book, and I remember experimenting with a patch, and like I put a patch on and I was immediately nauseated, and it was like the dose was way too high for me. But I'm curious about it. As someone who's been sort of opposed to nicotine and opposed to smoking for my entire career, it's kind of fun to look at these ways in which one might change one's mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the data on nicotine is, well, it's interesting, and it's also, to be fair, sparse, because most of the data that I've seen on nicotine, it's conflated with, obviously, smoking.
Yes.
We just don't have any long-term data. Well, we don't have any long-term data on like vaping and all that, which I wouldn't do. I would never do. But even these nicotine isolated like lip pouches and things like that, we don't really know the effects of long-term nicotine use on health. It's not a carcinogen. It may be beneficial from the standpoint of cognitive function and maybe even cognitive health. But I know that it also does have some potentially negative effects on the cardiovascular system, which just goes to show you that there's a trade-off with everything, unfortunately. But from a cognitive standpoint, I've definitely found benefit to using nicotine.
So how do you... Okay, this is super fun, Max. I'm obsessed with N of 1 experiments. Are you doing it with nicotine? Like, are you doing cognitive testing each day? Sort of a random assortment of cognitive tests and doing it with and without nicotine?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done any sort of cognitive test other than, I have lots of experience professionally as a communicator and being in a very sort of heightened state of awareness and vigilance whether I'm doing a podcast or if I'm on television and I have 3 minutes to deliver a ton of information. I mean, I've been doing that for the entirety of my career for the most part. So I have subjectively, I have noticed over the past 2-ish years that I've been experimenting with nicotine, I have noticed a fairly consistent and robust effect in terms of just like a benefit of bringing me more into the present. And I've found that it helps me to better, and I'm already very good at this. I think my career has shown that, but it helps me better articulate and like translate my thoughts to cogent sentences. It increases my verbal fluency.
Yeah.
I think. And I'm not suggesting that people run out and go start, taking nicotine, because it is an addictive chemical. And again, I think there are potentially some negative cardiovascular effects of using it chronically. But yeah, I think that I feel I'm pretty certain of the cognitive benefits that I get from it.
So when you notice these kind of benefits subjectively, is there a length of time that you try something like nicotine, and what form are you using? So I'm using a little sublingual nicotine spray. That's my N of 1 experiment. Tell me about yours.
Yeah, so I became aware, the first time I started dabbling with it, it was because a company popped onto my radar called Knick Knack Naturals, which I have no commercial affiliation with. But the owner is a guy named Nico. He's a very kind dude, and he hooked me up with some product. And I was like, I'm never going to take this. It's nicotine. Smoking is the worst thing ever for you. But it's an incredibly clean product. There's no artificial sweeteners in it. There's no tobacco in it. It's just a lozenge. And so I started experimenting with that, and then at a dose of about 3 milligrams. And then I think, like a lot of people, I became friendly with Tucker Carlson, of all people, because he had me on a show. I'm not a political junkie by any means, but I connected with him because he had me on a show to talk about my domain, which is like nutrition and health. And I think it's pretty, he's pretty open on pretty much every interview. He talks about his obsession with nicotine, and he uses a product called Zins, which now people are obsessed with. Again, zero affiliation with this company. But then I started experimenting with those, which are not as clean as knickknacks. So again, I'm not recommending that anybody go out and try this. They have artificial sweeteners and things like that. But yeah, so I've used basically both of those. Like I've used knickknacks and I've tried Zins, and yeah, I use them very sparingly, only when I know that I need to be on. Because the other thing about nicotine, and this is not meant to be an ad for nicotine, but it's a stimulant, but it's got a very short half-life. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't affect your sleep the way caffeine might, which has a much longer half-life. And genetically, I'm a caffeine slow metabolizer.
Me too.
And so I found like if I'm doing something like late in the day where I need all my faculties firing on all cylinders, I found it a really great tool to have at my disposal. It doesn't affect sleep. You know, if you do it in the late afternoon, you don't want to do it too close before bedtime, but yeah, so those are the two ways in which I use it primarily.
It's super interesting. I mean, I see how data agnostic you are, you know, like with the sort of the framing of nicotine over the past few decades, and how you've been open to the possibility that it might enhance you cognitively. The other thing that I've tried for my diagnosed ADD is a supplement. I have no affiliation with these folks, but it's called Dopamine Brain Food by Natural Stacks. Have you ever tried that?
No. I'm familiar with the company, but never tried that product.
Yeah, so I find that helpful. I mean, I was treated for ADD for a number of years. My concern about it over time is that, like with many pharmaceuticals, I just thought there might be a way that it causes some adrenal dysregulation, kind of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis to become more dysregulated as a result of stimulating each day. And so I felt like I wanted to come up with a solution that worked better. I mean, certainly meditation is helpful, but I have to meditate like once an hour to be able to maintain focus throughout the day. And so I got interested in some of these other ways, things like, you know, using L-tyrosine, using L-theanine. And so I'm limited in terms of the caffeine effect and how that affects my sleep as well.
Yeah, I will say that one of the known cardiovascular effects of nicotine is that it acutely will raise your blood pressure. And I have tried using it as a pre-workout of sorts, because I figure, you know, if it's a stimulant and if it's a cognitive enhancer, maybe there's going to be some sort of indirect way in which it could help support my workouts. And the cardiovascular effects of nicotine are very apparent when you take it while exercising. You feel out of breath. It's a very odd and unpleasant phenomena for me. And so to me, that has shown me very clearly that there's an unintended cardiorespiratory downside to it. So
yeah, I feel like I should probably know the nicotine effects separate from smoking on the cardiovascular system. I'm curious about the vascular response. So you said it raises blood pressure. Is that both systolic and diastolic? Probably more of a systolic effect.
Probably. I'm not sure, though.
So I'm curious about that. And, you know, here's one of my action items after our podcast. So one of my mentors is Mark Houston, who's based in Nashville. He's the one who kind of tracks my cardiometabolic phenotyping over time. I'm going to ask him. Yeah. And I'll circle back with you.
Yeah, I'd love to know. But I've been known to experiment with all kinds of things. Like I try. There's actually one small study to validate the use of sildenafil, aka Viagra, as a pre-workout. In this study, they found that Viagra reduced fatigue and actually increased muscle protein synthesis.
Interesting. So nitric oxide is helping with protein synthesis?
It may help, yeah.
Was that a randomized trial?
It was a placebo-controlled trial, if I recall correctly.
It sounds like possibly the most popular study ever, or the second most popular.
Much has been made about it in online fitness circles, but I will say that I've taken Viagra pre-workout a handful of times at this point. And you take it about an hour before your workout, you head to the gym. And the pump is insane because Viagra, what it does, I mean, it increases blood flow to wherever you need it. You know, it,
Right.
it doesn't automatically lead to sexual arousal.
Right.
You still need that stimulus
Yeah.
for that to occur.
So stimulate your other muscles.
Yeah, your other organs. And I found it to be really great. I'm not recommending that people go out and do this because there are risks. But yeah, I think I've taken like 25 milligrams of Viagra pre-workout, and the pump that I had was like unreal. It was for back day, and I felt like I had like a turtle shell on my back.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the dose is a little lower than what's used for erectile dysfunction.
What is it typically for?
Typically
used for ED?
50 to 100.
Interesting. Yeah, but I figure like those doses have been established with like old people with like
Yeah.
erectile dysfunction, maybe some latent like cardiovascular disease.
Probably.
Who knows?
Yes.
Like I'm young and healthy.
Yeah, your nitric oxide is probably a little better than the guys in the study.
Yeah. Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.